So today we start the first in a series of the new set of requests by our channel's best hammer follower, John Walco. John, thanks for your request. Now we're going to review The Mummy to clear up some misconceptions about The Mummy. This isn't a pure remake of the Universal movie of 1932, although it held the title, it had more to do with the mummy's hand in the mummy's tomb, with the climax borrowed directly from the mummy's ghost, all three great mummy movies. Now, this came out in 1959, again by Hammer, directed by the great Terence Fisher and starring the dynamic duo of Peter Cushing and Christopher Lee. Written by Jimmy Sangster and produced by Michael Carraras and Anthony Nelson Keys for Hammer. The film was distributed in the U.S. in 59 and a double bill with either the Vincent Price vintage film The Bat or the Universal film Curse of the Undead. Now, ironically, Universal did The Mummy, but Rank and Universal distributed this reboot. Now, again, though the title suggests Universal's 32 film of the same name was the main connector. Again, the mummy's hand, the mummy's tomb with the mummy's ghost. The character name Joseph Wemple, the use of a sacred scroll, and a few minor plot elements are the only connections with the 32 version. Now, a big hit at the box office. I guess nearly 860,000 French went and internationally made millions and millions on an investment allegedly of less than £125,000. Now, in the plot, in Egypt in 1895, archaeologist John Banning, his father Stephen, and his uncle Joseph Wemple are searching for the tomb of Princess Anaka, the high priestess of the god Kamak. John has a broken leg and cannot accompany his father and uncle when they open the tomb. Before they go in, an Egyptian named Mehetmet Bey warns them not to go in, lest they face the fatal curse against desecrators. Stephen and Joseph ignore him and discover within the sarcophagus of Ananka. After Joseph leaves to tell John the good news, Stephen finds the scroll of life and reads from it. Outside, members of the archaeological team hear his screams and rush into the tomb to find Stephen in a catatonic state. Now, 3 years later, back in England, Stephen comes out of his catatonia at the Angerfield nursing home for the mentally disordered and sends for his son. He tells him that when he read from the scroll of life, he unintentionally brought back to life Karis, the mummified high priestess of Kamak. The high priest had been sentenced to be entombed alive to serve as the guardian of Princess Ananka's tomb. Karis secretly loved the princess and attempted to restore her to life after she passed. When he was discovered, eternal life and mummification were his punishment. Now Stephen tells his believing son that Karis will hunt down and kill all those who desecrated Attica's tomb. Meanwhile, Mehmet Bey, a devoted worshipper of Karnak, comes to the into the Angerfield location under the alias of Mehmet Atkil to wreak vengeance on the Bannings. He hires a pair of drunken caterers, Pat and Mike, to bring the slumbering Karis in a crate to be rented home. But the two men's drunken driving caused Karis's crate to fall off and sink to a bog. Later, using the scroll of life, Mehmet exhorts Karis to rise from the mud, then sends him to murder Stephen Banning. When Karis kills Joseph Wemple the next night, John witnesses it. He shoots Karis with a revolver at close range, but to no effect. Now, Police Inspector Mulrooney is assigned to solve the murders, but because he is skeptical and deals only in cold hard facts, he does not believe John's incredible story about a killer mummy, even when John tells him that he's likely to be Karis' third victim. When Mulrooney investigates, and it never ends well when someone involved is called Mulrooney, John notices that his wife, Isobel, bears an uncanny resemblance to Princess Ananka. Gathering testimonial evidence for other individuals in the community, Mulrooney slowly begins to wonder if the mummy is real. Now, Mehmet sends the mummy to the Bannings' home to slay his final victim. However, when Isabel rushes to her husband's aid, Karis sees her, releases John, and leaves. Mehmet mistakenly believes that Karis has completed his task and prepares to return to Egypt. John, suspecting Mehmet of being the one controlling the mummy, pays to a visit, much to Bey's surprise. So here's we get to the nitty gritty. After John leaves, Mehmet leads Karis in a second attempt on John's life. The mummy knocks Mulrooney unconscious, while Mehmet deals with another policeman guarding the house. Karras finds John in his study and starts to choke him. Alerted by John's shouts, Isabel runs to the house without Mulrooney. At first, the mummy does not recognize her, but John tells her to loosen her hair and the mummy releases John. When Mehmet orders Karras to kill Isabel, he refuses. Mehmet tries to murder Isabel himself, but is killed by Karras instead. The mummy carries the unconscious Isabel into the swamp, followed by John, Mulrooney, and the other policeman. John yells at Isabel. When she regains consciousness, she tells Karras to put her down. The mummy reluctantly obeys. When Isabel is moved away from him, the policemen open fire, causing Karras to sink into the quagmire, taking a scroll of life with him. Now, Christopher Lee as the mummy is just tremendous, or as Karras. Peter Cushing plays John Banning, Yvonne Furneaux as Isabel Banning, Princess Naka, Eddie Byrne as Inspector Mulrooney, 2 O's by the way, Felix Aylmer as Stephen Banning, Raymond Huntley as Joseph Wemple, George Pastel, a very good performance, as Mehmet Bey, Michael Ripper as Poacher, George Woodward as P.C. Blake, Harold Goodwin as Pat, Dennis Shaw as Mike, and Stanley Meadows as character attendant. Now, filming occurred primarily at Bray Studios in Berkshire. Originally, the scenes of Karras' tongue being cut out and shotgun demise were more graphic, but were trimmed for the British censor. In the video Flesh and Blood, The Hammer Heritage of Horror, Cushing says he suggested a scene in which he drives a spear through the mummy. He was inspired by the pre-release poster, which shows the mummy with a shaft of light passing through it. Now, a fiberglass replica of a sarcophagus graded to film is noted to be still in the collection of the Perth Museum and Art Gallery. Now, the Monthly Film Bulletin of the UK heavily praised the movie. More glamorously photographed than ever, Hammer's latest excursion to 19th century Macquarie fantasy is weighed down by worldly historical expositions, flashback to ancient Egyptian burial ceremonies, and a resultant slackening in pace, but still a solid movie. Howard Thompson, New York Times, called the film not as good as expected, as it was woodenly directed and should have been better. However, Variety wrote that the film was excellently executed in all technical departments, and while there was a title of little of actual newness to the plot, the film carries the type of action expected. Now, the Hammer story, the authorized history of Hammer, wrote of the film, structurally little more than a string of picturesque and nice-lit killings. The mummy's melancholic presentation and romantic undertow grants it a certain atmosphere which elevates his bandage brute far beyond his cinematic predecessors. It currently holds a positive 89% fresh on Film Review aggregate website Rotten Tomatoes based on 9 reviews. But here's the deal, ladies and gentlemen. If you're a mummy fan or the mummy genre, this is the movie for you. Now, Nina Wilcox Putman, who was the co-writer of the original 32 Universal Mummy film, didn't like it and was said she was highly critical of the Hammer adaptation, writing a letter to Time magazine. This disgusting English remake was done without my knowledge or consent, and has been a terrible shock at the age of 75 to find such a work attributed to me, however wrongly and by indirection. But then again, this movie wasn't a remake of The Mummy, but then again, she got paid probably. Last I checked, because she was considered almost a co-writer of the movie that Sangster put together. Now, eventually, the film was adapted into a 12-page comic strip for the July 78 issue of Hammer Howls of Horror, drawn by David Jackson or a script by Steve Moore, and the cover of the issue featured a painting by Brian Lewis of Christopher Lee as Karras. Now, the film is cited as particular influence on the Doctor Who serial Pyramids of Mars. Now, for what it was and for what it is, you're looking at the Mummy in color, Christopher Lee and Cushing, and as good as Lee was as Dracula, he's almost as good as the Mummy, but the thing is, it's still a mummy. You know, there's not too much movement, so you have to leave your brains at the door. But I think what John had wanted to maybe me to mention, it's all in the eye of the beholder. If you like Hammer movies in all aspects, this is a good start for the Mummy series, because there's enough of the Boris Karloff Mummy in this movie that you can say, hey, what will Christopher Lee do this? It's a reboot, but not, if that makes any sense. So, ladies and gentlemen, this is the first on several of the Walco requests on the Mummy series. Stay tuned. If you like what we're doing here, give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share. Bye.